Can you just put it here?
Thank you.
Okay. So, David, am I a go? Almost. All right, so let's just review our confusion. Rav Yosef learns that the fact that you can bury in the kilayim, bury a person in kilayim, mitzvahs b'telis lasi lavo. Right? There's no more mitzvahs in the future. Abaya comes along and says, that's only true regarding eulogizing, but burying you cannot. Which means seemingly he's saying that mitzvahs are not batul in the future. Comes and they bring the words of Rabbi Yochanan that says, no, you can even bury him. So on the outside it looks like Rabbi Yochanan is coming to back up Rav Yosef, that mitzvahs are batul. But then it gets confusing because it says that his reason is because the Mesim Chavshi, that dead people are free from mitzvahs, which seems that he's sort of ignoring the reality that this is a conversation about after you rise from the dead. It sounds like he's talking about when the person's dead, and therefore we don't really understand him. Additionally, we said, if the Gemara is trying to prove that Rabbi Yochanan has the opinion that mitzvahs are batul in the future, like Rav Yosef, then let's look at the Gemara of Sanhedrin when we see that Rav Yosef says that where do we know Tchias HaMesim from the Torah? That we're going to give Truma to Aaron when he wakes up from the dead. Right? And so we see that there are mitzvahs in the future. If he's talking about the resurrection, we're going to have to still give Truma. So it looks like he doesn't even hold by Rav Yosef's opinion that mitzvahs are batul in the future. Why was he brought as a proof text for Rav Yosef? I'm saying it quick because we learned it in depth yesterday and the day before. You remember?
That's Rabbi Yochanan saying he says in Sanhedrin.
In Sanhedrin, he seems to have the opinion, which is the opposite of what the Gemara is insinuating in the Gemara of Nida, where he's being used as a proof that there are no mitzvahs in the future. He himself clearly holds that there are. Okay, so then to alleviate all of this confusion, we started to understand a new version of what does it mean mitzvahs are batelus lasi lavo. I just want to sort of reframe this whole conversation. What's bothering us all this time? There's two conflicting divrei Chazal. One says that mitzvahs, and especially the oral Torah, is something which is li'olam or la'ol me'olamid. It will be forever, and it can't be changed, added to, or subtracted. And there's another statement which says mitzvahs are batul in the future. So at first we're trying to figure out what this means. At first we started picking on the one that says, no, mitzvahs are not really forever. It's only like the forever of a period when they're in use. And we sort of threw that out the window. So mitzvahs are forever. We can't get rid of that. So what about mitzvahs are batul, right? Let's look at what it means mitzvahs are batul. How do we understand this? And we're going to sort of attack that. Maybe mitzvahs aren't batul, right? Because one of these sides has to give. You following me or not?
Where are these two sources, Rabbi?
You asked me before. The one is from Nida, where it says mitzvahs are batul in the future. It's a Gemara. And one is pashut from the Chumash, right? It says that the Torah cannot be added to and subtracted to, but primarily from the Rambam. We're quoting all the time the Rambam, where he explains that the oral Torah is forever. And we also explained that we also brought the idea that the halachas specifically will never be nullified in the future. We brought that actually from a Gemara in Yerushalmi, in Megillah, Perek Aleph, Halacha Hey. You got it. Mazel Tov Chassan.
We're going to go back to the Rambam statement that the Mishnah Torah is everything.
Of course. That's where we're going, right? But in the meantime, we are going to try to resolve these two conflicting divrei Chazal by now remangling the one that says mitzvahs are batul in the future. And what we mean by that is we introduced a new definition of the word mitzvahs, which makes it all make sense. That while the concept of mitzvah truly is not batul in the future because God's will is eternal and can never go away, but the notion of to command another person, the notion of mitzvah not as the word means connection and a joining, that will stay forever, Hashem's essential will. But the idea that Hashem is going to be mitzaveh another person, is going to command another person, that in fact will go away. That notion of the mitzvah will go away. And why? Because in the future there's going to be a revelation of God, and there's not going to be an experience of self anymore, right? It says, Yisrael, Reis v'kuchabrichu kul echad. There's a notion from the Zohar that says the Jewish people and he puts in parentheses, through the Torah, become one with God, right? So we're not going to actually have a sense of self, and therefore the concept of mitzvahs will be batul. And that's how we got out of this mess.
Are we still going to be doing them?
What's that?
We're still going to be doing them?
Say it again?
Are we still going to be doing them?
Yes, we will be doing them, but not as a person who's like agreeing to a command with free will. Like the mitzvah that God does, like His will, which is mitzvah, will just have completely taken over the world, almost like the way the rules of nature work now. They just do what Hashem wants them to do, not because they're like complying, right? It's just that's the will of God. So too, the whole will of God will be filled with the Torah's will, the true panemius will of God, and it will just like go in accordance with the truth of Torah, and that will be our reward. We'll experience like God's glory in the world in every step. Even we said the dates will scream out, "Don't eat me on Shabbos," right? Wow. Don't pluck me, or don't. It's whatever the halachic problem would have been. Don't date me. All right, so fine. That's what we got up to yesterday. But now we want to go back and, with this new understanding, revisit the sugya with Rabbi Yochanan, because we didn't actually go back and sort of make that make sense. We're still in a nigla problem. Now we have sort of placed a new Chassidic understanding. Let's bring the Chassidic understanding, and this is, by the way, something that we want to point out whenever we get the chance, how we have a problem with the nigla, right? There's Pashat Rabbi Yochanan against himself, and we're just stuck with that. When you add the dimension of Chassidus, it heals your problems with nigla, and it answers many, many, many questions in nigla that could not be answered without Chassidus. That's why those who want to say Chassidus is just like a nice frill that you can put some sugar on your coffee, it's not true. It's an essential aspect of Torah learning that without it, there's many, many questions in nigla that you don't have an answer to, and this is one of them. So he says like this, according to the second column, let's all take it together. Page 454, second column, top. We can now answer the question, the contradiction within the words of Rabbi Yochanan. You probably want to look at this, unless you have it on your phone there. He holds that you're allowed to bury a person with kilayim. Because he does hold that mitzvahs are batul in the future, even though he also learned, right? So if you can bury with kilayim, it's because he thinks there's no mitzvahs in the future. And yet we know by him that when the dead rise, we're still going to be doing mitzvahs and giving our truma to Aaron. How does it come together? Because yes, it's true. The existence of giving truma to Aaron, right, and doing the mitzvahs will still be taking place. But it will no longer be in a way where someone has to command a person to give Aaron truma. Because now we can understand also that confusing word of remember Rabbi Yochanan went according to his reason. What was his reason? That the dead are free from mitzvahs. And we said, well, that's weird because he's talking about the time when the person's dead. We're talking about the time when the person's alive. The Rebbe is going to go back and reread the words Meisim Chavshi. And in a positive sense, not in a negative sense that like, Chaval, you're dead, you don't have to do mitzvahs. But in a positive sense, Chavshi mina mitzvahs, L'mailusa, in the parentheses, he says, Chavshi l'mailusa, in a positive sense. She'enu zakuk l'tzivoy. You're free from the concept of command that a command would be issued to you as an independent person. That's what you're free from. You're not free from doing a mitzvah. You're free from being commanded in a mitzvah as a private individual. So that's what it means, b'meisim chavshi. You're free from the burden of experiencing ego. Since you're not your own man. You are one with God. And therefore, he's saying mitzvahs are batul. What does he mean when he says mitzvahs are batul? The concept of mitzvahs are commanding to another person. And then he explains himself, because meisim chavshi, because when you're dead, you're free from ego, right? Even when you relive. In other words, even when he says when you're dead, you're free, he doesn't mean when you're actually dead, you're free. He means when in the world of Techiyas HaMeisim, you're free from the sense of self. And therefore he does hold you'll give truma to Aaron because there's no you. It's basically just like the natural world complying as a singularity with God, with Hashem's essential will, with his mitzvah. Therefore he says you can go ahead and bury in your kilayim. And here's the question that many of you already tapped into. In other words, there's still a little contradiction here, right? Because if you're going to bury in Kilayim and he holds there's mitzvahs in the future, what are you going to do when you get up? You're like in a state of an Avera. Like first thing first, you like do an Avera, right? Because there are still mitzvahs. So how are you like so one with God and you're busy with Kilayim on when you get up? So he answers, Kishyamod la'asid lo ya'alav hatzivo the Easter Kilayim. So one, like sort of the most basic answer is, he won't have anyway the commandment of not having kilayim on. So in other words, he's not really transgressing because there's no one commanding him. And he goes further, he says, and anyway, he's for sure not going to leave the kilayim on after the moment of rising from the dead. Im kilo Torah's tzivoy, even though that's not going to happen because his compliance with the commandment, he's going to suddenly take it off. Ela b'derech mamela, but automatically, mitzad ratzono shel HaKadosh Baruch Hu, because the will of God will reign. Lishlo, right, and it will negate. Shemizgaleu mizbata idea isur de kilayim. It will negate automatically any prohibition of kilayim that's in the world, so it'll automatically be removed from him. Right? Now, there's some cool footnotes on this. Before we go, we have a question.
Who's the guy who said Lamesim Chavshi?
Lamesim Chavshi is Rabbi Yochanan.
So, Rabbi Yochanan's saying that the dead and also when you come back to life, you're considered one with God. But the level of being one with God during Tchias HaMesim is a higher level than the soul when you're dead.
When he says Lamesim Chavshi, what he means there is not the dead person. He's talking about the resurrected dead person. In other words, after death.
But you'd have to say it's about death also. How would you like picking and choosing what exactly he's speaking of?
No, because if there's two versions of the Olam Haba, right? There's not versions. There's two explanations, definitions of the words Olam Haba, right? Like one is the world that's after this world in the heaven when you have no body, and also Kol Yisrael Yeshem Chelek LeOlam Haba. That's referring to Tchias HaMesim. Right? So they're both sort of called dead. It depends what you're talking about. The problem before was we were saying the first version of Lamesim Chavshi, it actually meant dead. It meant you're actually free from the mitzvahs. He's now changing the definition to talk about a different Olam Haba. He's talking about now the Olam of Tchiyah, which is, by the way, normal that we would translate it that way, because the whole conversation that's taking place over there is about the Olam of Tchiyah. In fact, the question we had is, why did he switch the conversation? You're talking about dead people. We were talking about living people, right? So we're saying, no, because Lamesim Chavshi also means the time of Tchias HaMesim. And it's saying it in a positive sense. What are you free from, right? You're free from your sense of self. Like in your state of, you're dead, in other words, in your ego. That's what you mean. You're alive, but you are dead. And therefore you're free from being commanded. Mesim Chavshi.
So everyone's calling the people who come back to life by Tchias HaMesim dead.
Yes, and you might say, well, that's a forced answer. But on the contrary, what was forced was this ridiculous answer that he gave to the conversation that was taking place when we were talking about people raising from the dead. And he goes and gives his reason that because when they're dead, they're not obligated mitzvahs. You change the conversation from a person who rose from the dead to being dead. The Rebbe is actually making it make sense. He's like, no. He was talking about the same thing that the rest of the Gemara was talking about. You have to learn the words properly. He meant dead in a positive sense. You're dead, your ego is dead. And you're free from being commanded, right? You're not free from doing mitzvahs. The mitzvahs don't even apply to you anymore. And you might say, again, it's not a forced answer. It's the only sensible answer because the Gemara is bringing that as a proof for Rabbi Yosef. Right? Rabbi Yosef says mitzvahs are batul, just like Rabbi Yochanan says. And then when he says something else, no, so Rabbi explains. He's not saying something else.
So we really have no idea what's going on in Gemara without Chassidus.
Many times. Every time. In other words, you can think that you know what's going on in Gemara. Once Chassidus comes in, it enriches the whole. Even if you had a good understanding, it deepens your understanding in a completely way. Because the truth is, the Gemara is a body to a soul, and you can study the body all day long. But when the soul's in the body, all your studies of the body have to be reevaluated now in light of the fact that it's alive, right? Yeah.
So you don't have to do mitzvahs if you have no ego?
You don't. There's no you to be commanded in the mitzvah, but you'll be naturally doing the mitzvah because God is doing the mitzvahs, and you're one with God. So just like God goes along in a state of constant mitzvah performance, you will be in a constant state of mitzvah performance, but not out of your free choice, automatically. So that's what it means. There will be mitzvahs will be nullified on one hand, and they won't be nullified on the other hand, depending on your understanding of what the word mitzvah is.
Don't we say that people already want that? Like everyone wants to do mitzvahs already. So like, what's I guess the practical difference? Like you said that like all Jews naturally already all want mitzvahs. I know.
They do it at soul level, we're saying, but the point is that they have free choice. Like their soul, their essential. That's exactly you're making the same point we're making. What's the difference between now and then? Now your essential will can be covered over, and therefore you're not residing in a oneness with God. At that time, all of your animalistic kind of like concealing self will be elevated or dismantled, whatever it is, and your true will, which is the will of God, will be on display. Yeah.
Just the whole thing of putting the person lechatchila in what's it called?
Kilayim.
It's kind of like putting a seed upside down. Like it's going to germinate anyways. Like it would be helpful to put it the right way up. If you put it upside down, it's still going to come back up.
Okay, check out these footnotes. I hear you. That's cool. Check out footnote 43, 44, and 45, and 46. They're all on this very topic of the kilayim, that wearing the kilayim, because this is interesting stuff. So he says, you have a copy of the Sikha there, buddy? Does anyone have an extra one? Okay. Ula yesh lomar. Maybe we can say Shema Kasuv Masha Amara Rambam. This is the Rambam says Mutula sos mina kilayim tachrich lemeis she'ein ala meisi mitzvah. Look what the Rebbe does now. He's pushing the Rambam into being a Chassidic language, right? He says this is the Rambam says you're allowed to bury the guy with kilayim ki ein ala meisim mitzvah, because the dead do not have a mitzvah. Kai gam al hazman shel achri atachia. In other words, we thought the Rambam was paskening according to like the wrong reading of Rabbi Yochanan. Rabbi Yochanan says you can bury the guy because when he's dead he doesn't have a mitzvah. The Rambam paskens like him. But the Rebbe says no, the Rambam is really paskening like the new Hasidic interpretation that we've just brought out from Rabbi Yochanan, which means what is the Rambam really saying? Even when the person rises from the dead, right? Shelo yeh azat tzivoy de isur kilayim. He's not going to have the prohibition of wearing kilayim. As we said, even though certainly he's not going to stay with the kilayim on, but he doesn't have the mitzvah, meaning he doesn't have the feeling of self, where he would have to be commanded. Halachos hilchos shel Torah, because the laws of Torah, kol gam hilchos ad kilayim, because we're maintaining that the laws of the Torah, including the Torah's laws of kilayim, einan batelis liolam, they really are not nullified in the future in their essence, right? Only in the sense of being commanded to the other, and therefore he'll obviously take off the kilayim as soon as he wakes up. And then he goes further in footnote 44, and he says, "Shegam l'shitas atosvos shemitzvos batelis lasi lavo." That even according to the Tosafos, who does hold that mitzvahs are batel in the future, right? Kai lo ala olam shalachar hamaves. It's referring to not the world when you go to when you die. Ela al olam atachia. In other words, hainu rak berega atachia. Aval achrei kach peshita diachzur liisuro. So in other words, even according to the Tosafos that says mitzvahs are batel in the future, he holds that only on the moment that you rise, the mitzvahs will be batel. So you're not like waking up in a situation of isur, right? Because you're going to quickly take them off afterwards. So there's like a little daya in there that at the moment of rising, the mitzvahs are batel, which means he doesn't have to, according to the Tosafos, right? This is not like our general shita, but the Tosafos understands this. How can you put on techeles and you're going to rise from the dead? So the Tosafos understands that you're going to, because the mitzvahs are batel in the future, means the moment of rising. But then you'll take them off. Like, so you're not automatically chayiv. But this is really the interesting part.
Does that answer all the questions, all the problems? That little Chassidus basically clears up all the original problems we had with Rabbi Yossi and Rabbi Yochanan, etc.
Because he says it's like the mitzvahs are batel just for an instant.
They're batel, but also they're not.
Right.
So then that kind of, so technically we would be able to understand the Gemara.
Yeah, that's Tosfos is coming in and trying giving it some explanation behind it. Yes. Footnote 45. Mistaber Lomer. He's going over here that you're going to be wearing the kilayim and take them off immediately after you rise. Shegam berega techiyah lo yeh levush bekilayim. So the Rebbe wants to say, however, that he doesn't like the answer of the Tosfos because it's not a good answer, right? Because guess what? Mitzvahs are not batul in the future. Because the Hashem's mitzvah is eternal, right? So you're not. So the Rebbe proposes that even the moment that he wakes up from the Techiyim, where he's busy with the kilayim on footnote 45, he won't be wearing kilayim. Why? B'derech mamela, and he says ba'ofen nisi, automatically and in a miraculous way. What, like Hashem can't make a miracle? Hashem's will rules the world at that time. You thought you were wearing kilayim, but now that Hashem will rules the world, you're going to wake up without them on, because there's not going to be an instant where God's will is not going to be happening. Mitzad Ritzono Shel HaKadosh Baruch Hu B'Yisura B'Kilayim. He'll be in a tuxedo and a bow tie. What do we care? He's not wearing kilayim, right?
That also just answers all the problems.
Does he even have a body?
Yeah, for sure. Tchias HaMesim is bodies, is souls in bodies.
And clothing also. That's not for sure.
There's a machlokes, Ramban. Chassidus paskins like the Ramban on this. Yeah, like Pinimius Torah paskins like the Ramban. And we show how the Rambam really says the same thing as is our way.
Right, so the Rebbe's giving this whole intricate answer to the problem, and then he basically brings a footnote, and he's like, it doesn't really matter anyway, the problem in the first place, because we won't have the issue of kilayim anyway, because Hashem will make a miracle. Because it does solve the problem. Is like, because if he doesn't, in other words, why is he making such a miracle, right? Why is he making such a miracle? Because his because mitzvahs are not batul, right? And therefore, this guy has a problem. Like, what's he going to do? He's wearing kilayim, right? So Hashem's going to take off his kilayim. So according to that, there shouldn't be any problem burying the guy with kilayim either.
That's the psak, right? Rambam Paskins like Rabbi Yochanan. Just the question is why? How does that work with the techiyah? So Tosfos says he'll take them off. There's a moment when he's not judged. Rebbe says no, not necessary for that answer. He's not going to be wearing them when he wakes up. Automatically, because the God's will rule the earth, and the mitzvah will be automatic. And one last point on this point, footnote 46. Al pizeish levar divrei. Okay, remember you asked before, how does this jive with the Rebbe Rashab's explanation of mitzvahs batelis lavo? If you remember, who can remember what the Rebbe Rashab said about this?
They're unified in God. There's no distinction of the mitzvahs. So it's not like...
We gave an analogy of the candle, shraga betihara, the candle that you light in the afternoon sunlight. It basically is ineffectual and negated for its nothingness. So too, the mitzvahs will be batul in the future means there'll be such a revelation of like the infinite Or Ein Sof that part of God, which is called mitzvah, will be completely insignificant. So he explained it like that, and we thought that was a cool answer. But even the Rebbe you didn't understand that? You're not the only one. But we said that it doesn't actually. Rebbe Rashab's answer is cool and Hasidic and lovely, but it doesn't actually deal with the pshat, which is okay. Mitzvahs are like there's going to be this great light, and mitzvahs are insignificant. But is the guy going to be wearing kilayim or not? Like it didn't address the issue. So now he's going to bring back the Rebbe Rashab in light of this and now explain what the Rebbe Rashab really meant. Did you understand that? Okay, so what does the Rebbe Rashab say? He says, now we can understand the words of the Rebbe Rashab when he says that the meaning of mitzvahs are batul in the future. It does not mean that they're actually batul, says the Rebbe Rashab, but rather they're batul by their lack of, so to speak, taking up any place in front of this essential light of God, like a candle in the afternoon. Gam al pi pashtus divrei Gemara. Now we can understand that in line with the actual pshat of the Gemara regarding actually being buried in kilayim, because the commandment to the person al derech isur kilayim is batul b'chinas heder tefisas makom legabi ora atzmi shebe isur kilayim mitzad ratzonu atzmi shel HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Why? Because again, mitzvahs are batul, meaning the commandment to the person. That's in other words. What did the Rebbe Rashab say? He says mitzvahs are batul in the future. That was his position. Mitzvahs are batul in the future. And what he said was like they almost don't hold any space. Now just enter in the Rebbe's chiddush in this. Why don't they hold any space? because the person doesn't exist anymore, right? He's just like one and united with God. And therefore, the Isur of Kilayim will just disappear. In other words, anything negative will be removed from this person's body because of the essential light which is shining. So the mitzvahs, in other words, the idea of separateness in the word of mitzvah is batul, and it holds up no space in front of this essential light, and that actually winds up with the person not doing an Isur. It solves the also pshat level of the conversation. In other words, let me just say it one more time. He's saying mitzvahs are batul in the future because of the essential light. And we're saying, yeah, that sounds nice, except is the guy wearing kilayim or not? Right? In other words, they're seemingly not batul. He has to deal with that. So we're saying when you explain the matter that mitzvahs are batul means the person no longer has a metzias of his own, there's an essential level of reality overtaking this person, then it all works out well because he's not wearing kilayim suddenly anymore. It deals with the pshat. They're going to be miraculously removed due to the essential light of God's will, which will overtake everything.
It makes it difficult to see how we have free will at that point.
It seems that we will not be free will at that point. Can you pass in the papers? What's that?
I feel like it'll be like free will on the top.
I was thinking about that, but I'm not even sure about that. This is a pretty high level stuff. Tchilas
A
HaMesim.
little less free will. It's kind of like the mitzvahs don't go away. The act of the mitzvah